All of these lines across my face tell you the story of who I am. So many stories of where I've been and how I got to where I am. But these stories don't mean anything when you've got no one to tell them to. It's true, I was made for you. I climbed across the mountain tops, swam all across the ocean blues. I crossed all the lines and I broke all the rules, but baby, I broke them all for you. Oh, because even when I was flat broke, you made me feel like $1,000,000. You do. I was made for you. Smile that's on my mouth, it's hiding the words that don't come out. All of my friends who think I'm blessed, they don't know my head is a mess. No, they don't know who I really am, and they don't know what I've been through like you do. I was made for you. All of these lines across my face tell you the story of who I am. So many stories of where I've been and how I got to where I am. Oh, but these stories don't mean anything when you've got no one to tell them to. It's true, I was made for you. Oh yeah, it's true, I was made for you. That was the song Story by Brandi Carlile. And I'm Heather Lynn. Welcome to Live Online with Heather Lynn. We are recording from the Ancient Kingdom of Dumnonia. Actually, currently commonly known as Cornwall. Cornwall, England. It has been part of the United Kingdom for a long, long while. But there's a lot of story here, and I'm excited to explore some of those stories and explore the ideas of story and narrative and how they shape us as we talk with my good friend Matt Valler here. This is the monthly story dwelling edition of Live on Live with Heather Lynn. We try to do at least once a month some music and conversation with someone who I think is really interesting. And Matt Valler is really interesting, I think, because he just is interested in a lot of things and finds a lot of things interesting and kind of lives out, I think, this story-dwelling idea and ideal and ethos that Jason and I aspire to cultivate and practice a courageous, compassionate curiosity for ourselves and for others, and to kind of live and walk in this world with a deeply listening posture, so that we understand kind of more about why we have the reactions that we have and why we think the way we do, and how that interfaces and sometimes really nicely interweaves and makes like harmonious resonance with other stories, and sometimes there's collision and conflict, and dissonance. And Matt is someone who's spent a lot of time around these ideas and has explored story in a lot of ways. So I'm really grateful that we get to be in your home right now. Thank you for hosting us, Matt.
You're so welcome.
Matt's lovely family is hosting us since yesterday for a couple more days, and really excited to be here with you. And we first met in Malibu, not quite a couple of years ago, but the 9 Beats Collective brought us together, so we first met there, and I got to hear some of your contemplations on narrative and how you shape narrative too. And so would you just let people know a little bit of your background and how you also find yourself in the Ancient Kingdom of
Nearly.
I was saying it well for a while.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, well, let me just first say I'm really happy to be here, and it's such a pleasure to be with you and have you guys stay with us.
Thank you.
I love the idea of story dwelling. I love the album, but I love the idea because one of the things I work on is something we call narrative literacy, which I have to credit my friend Marcus Curnow for. He's a Cornishman living in Melbourne, Australia.
Oh, wow.
When I say Cornishman, like his ancestors left like 150 years ago, but in his mind he's absolutely Cornish, much more Cornish than me. So I'm an Englishman living in Cornwall.
Okay.
But we deal in stories, and the idea that stories shape the way we live, whether we know that they are or not. And so we're trying to learn how to read them, and also how to write them. And that's about agency. But Dumnonia is that's what this place was called like over 1,000 years ago, when Cornwall and Wales and even Brittany and northwestern France were all part of this kind of Celtic western fringe of the British Isles. Well, I say western fringe. It was actually the whole British Isles, and then the kind of the Vikings and the Anglo-Saxons came over and kind of pushed the Celts westwards.
Wow.
And then for over 1,000 years, Cornwall's been subject to a gradual process of colonisation by the English. So I find it interesting being here, story-wise. I'm an Englishman. I'm actually a direct descendant of the first king of all England, who was one of the original people to kind of colonise Cornwall. So I feel like that it was a long time ago, like more than 1,000 years, but I feel that in my own story, the sense of how do I figure out my own place in a place that has been consistently marginalised and has had its story and its language constantly eroded,
like minimalised and not valued, not validated. That's not the actual story.
And it's even today, like if people talk about Cornish identity, there's a Cornish nationalist movement who want independence, and that's a pretty small movement, but there's a much stronger movement that want real recognition for Cornish identity and better devolution of powers. They tend to be kind of laughed at, kind of like, that's a fringe idea, which is a tool of, it's what colonial power does to kind of, that the rights of certain people are just
sort of patronising.
Those guys are on again, Anyway, so I'm trying to figure out, how to listen and how to understand some of the stories from this place as an immigrant here.
I really appreciate that. So do you have royal blood? Are you like of a royal lineage?
Totally, I can trace my ancestors back to the Anglo-Saxon kings, but also the Norman conquest, William the Conqueror, right down to Henry the First. But to be honest though, that anyone who is of European descent can do the same. You just most people can't find the paperwork. They just happen to have someone who found the paperwork. But we are all statistically descended from every single person who was alive in our region of the world 1,000 years ago.
Okay, well that makes sense. Okay. That makes great sense.
I told you I was interested in everything.
Yeah, you are interested in everything. Yes, which is what makes you such an interesting person. Cool. So would you be willing to, I think one of the things that fascinates me is that, I've always actually been really drawn to Celtic history. And I don't know, I've always had I actually don't have much of an awareness of my own ethnicity and my own story that way, and I want to learn more, and I'm not even entirely sure how. I feel like there's been some stuff that's sort of been skipped over as, I mean, obviously my family were immigrants to the United States or America like a long time ago, so I think I have some Irish and Scottish background, but I don't fully know, and I feel like there's been a lot of the story that's just been sort of like forgotten, or like, oh, we don't tell that part of our story, or... So it's interesting, and I sometimes feel like when I learn more about Celtic history, maybe I'm learning more of my own story, but I'm not really sure. I just kind of have an intuitive drawing towards it.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to hear you talk about how being here, there's sort of an eastern and western Cornwall, and how there's a particular Cornish identity, and there are some people who say, no, this is what it really is, no, this is what it is, and who gets to decide what that is. Right. And then you also shared with us around the fire last night a couple of really fascinating stories that are part of the Ancient Kingdom of I'm just insecure about saying it now.
Dumnonia.
Yeah. So how long ago was it the Ancient Kingdom of Dumnonia?
To be fair, that was a long time. Like that was like 400 to 800 AD, that kind of time. And some of the Cornish stories that survive now are like, they're probably not that old, or fragments of them have been kind of found and developed. So, but Cornish storytelling is a very living tradition. Like you can be inducted as a bard of Cornwall, which is the Cornish name for Cornwall. So, so I feel like as an English person, even thinking about those stories, I'm dealing in somebody else's culture. So
which is important.
Yeah, well, it's important to respect it. I don't want to let it. I want to be part of listening to it, but also they're not. I feel like they're not mine. But we're all conflicted, right? So if you so I can trace back to King Egbert, founding King of England. He can trace back to 4th century Irish kings. So the Anglo-Saxon kings that pushed back the Celts is descended from the Celts. So in a sense, when it comes to ethnicity and background, culture and identity are something that are so fused, and really I think it comes down to a question of power. We are all really in the end from everybody. Right. But who has the power right now, and do you get associated with a group that's powerful or not? And that's really where the rub is. So do Cornish people have the power to tell their story is a question.
That's a good question. Yeah. Now you're making me think, I wonder if we could find a Cornish bard to tell a couple of their stories. That would be incredible.
If Marcus is watching this, he's going to be like, I've got so many bard friends. You could have set it up.
Okay. Would you like to share one of the stories that you've heard that would be of benefit for people, just to kind of have an idea of the depth and the richness of Cornish history, and kind of what you're just sharing it in a way of like, it's what you've heard and it's what you're connecting to, and it's what you're navigating. And
so I really enjoyed. I've got a book of Cornish folk tales by I want to get his name right, Mike O'Connell. So credit to Mike O'Connell. You've made my life more interesting. So there's a world famous story that has its roots in Cornwall. So Jack the Giant Killer. So that's like a fairy tale, Jack and the Beanstalk. That comes from a Cornish folk tale that's hundreds of years older than it, even when it made it into English law.
And I had no idea of that. I'm sure so many of our listeners had no idea.
So this takes place on a place on the south coast called St Michael's Mount. So it's amazing. You go down there, it's like a fairy tale castle kind of coming out of the sea, and there's a causeway across the sea to get there, but you have to wait till the tide's out. But there was a giant that lived there called Cormoran, and he was just really angry, and he would cross over the water, and he would raid the farms, and he would steal people's livestock, 10 sheep at a time he'd stuff into his belt, and then he'd head back, and the people just couldn't take it anymore. And Jack is this young boy, and he says, I've got to stand up for my people. So he takes a horn, and then he crosses over late in the evening, and all through the night he digs this huge pit at the foot of the mount while Cormoran is sleeping. And then he covers over the pit with like sticks and straw and leaves and stuff. And then as day is breaking, he blows the horn, and Cormoran wakes up, and he just taunts him. He says, "Come on, get me, you big ugly giant." And Cormoran chases him down, and calling all kinds of things after him, and Jack runs away, and Cormoran falls in the pit, and then Jack slams a pitch axe into his head. And that's the end of the giant. Jack the Giant Killer comes from Cornwall.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that story. I think Jack and the Beanstalk has a little bit of a more different twist on it.
Yeah.
And that's a Brothers Grimm story. I think most people think of it as a Brothers Grimm story.
Right.
But they must have gotten it from maybe.
Well, the Cornish are claiming it, so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So there's something really interesting that you do called Labyrinth, an app that people can find to kind of help them understand the stories that are embedded in their cities, right?
Yeah.
And I finally just downloaded the app, so I'm hoping I can maybe explore London a little bit that way, maybe explore Denver a little bit that way. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. So the app's called Labyrinth City Hacks, and it currently only works in Melbourne.
Okay.
It works everywhere. We only have content in Melbourne, so we're just kind of getting it going. But London content will be there really soon.
Nice.
We're gonna we hack cities. Is how it is. We hack cities for meaning.
What does that mean?
Well, so basically, so cities are there's architecture, there's public art, there's street design. All of these things carry in them stories that shape the way we live, that enforce the rules we live by, that are part of creating an environment in a city where people behave and live and expect certain things. And so when we hack cities, we're trying to hack that open, because most of us just go about our lives in cities and we don't have any sense of what those cities mean. We're just getting from A to B. So we're trying to slow down, trying to ask the questions. We use the idea of harmonics. So what is resonant? If that building and that piece of public art resonate, then that creates one effect. If there's dissonance between things, that creates a different effect. So I'll give you an example. So St Paul's Cathedral in London. Have you been there?
We just walked by it the other day.
All right. So at the front there's all those pillars.
Yes.
Yeah. So you go and stand on the pillars, like these huge doors. You look out down towards Fleet Street, which is a real powerful area. It's a historic media sector, and you are just embedded in the establishment, these huge pillars, these big doors, and there's a big statue of Queen Anne, which was at the kind of early days of the expansive British Empire, and round the base of the statue are these four women who represent, I think it's England, France, Ireland and North America, so the portions of the empire at that time. So you're kind of standing looking there from the perspective of empire down the street towards Buckingham Palace where the Queen lives. And then you go down onto the paving stones, down the bottom of the steps, and that's where the Occupy movement camped out in 2011.
Okay.
And they're protesting, the 1% who had taken resources from the 99. So you've got this kind of establishment icon really embedded in stone, and then you've got this transient tent city calling for something different.
That's incredible.
And the church ended up in a struggle with the Occupy movement for over months, and eventually had them evicted. So this kind of transience is so it's a very politically contested space. So we kind of try and imagine what's it like being in that contested space, who's our allegiance with, and then there's these incredible sculptures around the edge with these pillars with these great big rocks with faces carved into them. And then the sculptor who made them says she's trying to call out of the rock the form and voice of this ancient stone. And she does it, she says it's not religious, but she does it because she wants to honour the creator, which in her mind is Mother Earth. So the rocks are there before us, they're there after we're gone. And they're just these incredible faces, very dispassionate, just looking like humans are just passing in the night for them. And so you've got this great stone grandeur of a cathedral with all its theological symbolism, and then you've got the kind of theology of stone over here, and again it's a contested space. So you kind of find yourself in this politically contested space and then this theologically contested space, and that calls out meaning. It's not a clear story, it's not like a story of Jack the Giant Killer, but it's a story with complexity about who has the power, who doesn't. Do we want permanence or transience? Are we bedding down or are we on the move? Are we honouring a god in the sky or the creator from the ground? You know, these are really powerful, potent questions that make meaning in the city.
Yeah, that's incredible. Oh gosh, when I visit different places, like for example in America, like there's so many parts of the United States that I love. But when I was in New York recently, I felt like this feels really old, but actually not because that part of the earth is any older, and not because people have been living there any older, because we know that like indigenous people inhabited the land and they were transient tribes. So there's even more story there. But when I'm in New York, I can feel how old the buildings are. I feel like I feel like I can feel how many layers of story have been residing there, because there's actual physical embedding there. So it's like, to me, this sort of like spiritual, energetic, and physical thing that happens all at once. And then I think if I were to actually spend more time with the land in any part of the world, I would probably feel more of the stories that have happened there and who has passed through and journeyed through, you know. But I feel like with Labyrinth, you're talking about a like tangible access to artifacts of story in people's cities that we're hardly aware of, and that's incredible to me. Like, you're peeling back layers of story.
Yeah, that's right. Layers is the key. Yeah. Well, you're describing it. There's a name for it. It's called psychogeography. Oh. And there's a whole movement of people, which we would say we're part of as Labyrinth, who are exploring the kind of psychological effects of geography.
That's incredible.
Particularly in cities, on how we are. But you know, like we're here, like you can't see this, I'm afraid. There's a really nice view out the window, but like it has an effect, doesn't it? Like the land makes you feel a certain way, and then if you're in you go to Bank Station in London and you get out and there's the Bank of England, and it's just the most imposing building with this huge wall all the way around, just viscerally saying there is no way you're coming in, and you feel like that's really oppressed by it. Yeah. And that's psychogeography, the effect of place on your sense of self and well-being.
Wow. And the one thing I noticed in London particularly, I couldn't get over the architecture, honestly. I keep snapping all these photographs, and it's amazing how you'll see a building, it might be a whole like city street, where the facade, you'll see like a very old structure and then something very new and modern right next to it, and then something very old again, and they're all connected, but it's related to how back in World War II parts of London were bombed significantly. And so retaining some of the old buildings and the history of that, but then rebuilding alongside. There's story just like right there in front of your face, and I wouldn't have necessarily understood it or known even that little bit unless someone had shared with me.
Right, that's it. Yeah, because we don't know how to read cities.
Yeah. So why is this important to you?
So for me, it's about agency. Yeah. So it's about, do we have the capacity, the power to actually shape the environment in which we live? It's so much is shaped for us. So many stories that we dwell in, but that we're not aware that we dwell in, and they have incredible power over us. So even if a little bit, we can hack those stories and learn to read them more. We can have more agency to write them, to rewrite, to reinscribe them. That's a way of actually having power in the world.
I agree. And so if we're more aware of our own context and what's gone before us, rather than letting the media impose or politics impose, or so being aware of all those stories and how they're influencing us and our emotions and our psychology, if we have more awareness of what's really been happening for years before us, it helps all of that.
Because it puts it in context.
I love the way that you talk about the meaning that has been created and discovering meaning, and then how we make meaning. So this next song that I know, do you want to play this with me, actually?
Yeah,
maybe?
Right. Okay.
So this song that I'd like to share with folks is on the 9 Beats double album. And I don't know if you want to check there. This song is on the 9 Beats double album called In Recovery. And I wanted to share it with you all today because it relates for me to the stories that have been told and the story we're creating together, and whether or not there's intrinsic inherent meaning in things, or if we just have this remarkable way of creating meaning and ascribing meaning. And I feel like we can create a lot of problems ascribing meaning, but we can also create a lot of beauty. So it's this like invisible thing that we're doing all the time that comes out in tangible and intangible ways and impacts us deeply. So like when you talk about the psychology or the psychogeography, is that the school of thought you're talking about?
Yeah.
That's really profound to me. So our producer, Tony Bean of the 9 Beats album, he wrote the music for this song In Recovery and asked me to contribute a couple more stanzas. So he wrote the first couple stanzas, the chorus, the bridge, and then I wrote 3 more stanzas, the 3 last stanzas. And when we got into the studio, first of all, it really brought out in me poetry unlike any I'd ever written before, because I'd never collaborated like this before. I'd never taken someone's concept and cadence and then added my own words to try to carry on that concept faithfully, and be true to what they started with, but also kind of expand on it or something. And then when we got into the studio, since we're both our names are now on this song, and I'm the one to be singing it, I wanted to deliberate with him on a couple of things that he had written and see if we could come to a middle ground so that it could be integral to my voice. One of the lines in the song is, he just says, "There's a way it was meant to be." So I just deliberated with him. So I think what would be true and integral to my voice is asking the question, is there a way it was meant to be? Because I'm not fully sure every day of my life that there is a way it was meant to be. I'm not sure I fully believe at this moment in my journey that there's inherent intrinsic meaning to everything that happens. I think what is good and beautiful is that whatever happens, whether it's good or bad, we can ascribe meaning to it. We can take something that's terrible that's happened to us, and we can grow and create beauty from it. I also think, I might have already just said this, but we can cause a lot of problems ascribing meaning. So, and making assumptions about the way it was meant to be, because you might think it was meant to be a totally different way someone else thinks it was meant to be, right? So then when I do think about shoulds, so he also talks about like we're in recovery of how we should be. And that for me can be a trigger because I grew up in a sort of moralistic, like you need to ascribe to this very particular moral code, and if you don't, then you should be ashamed of yourself, like a very shaming narrative. So it's like, could I change that to be how we could be? Because to me that suggests possibility, invitation, and wonder of how we could be together, how we could exist in harmony as human beings in this world. And then also when I think about it, part of this process is like, as we're sharing how we interpret the story of life and God and humanity, like we're not necessarily changing each other's minds, me and Tony, as we talked about this, but we did change each other. It did push me to further consider, right? So I'm like, so actually, how do I even think about meaning and shoulds, right? And actually, I do think that how it was meant to be is that every child should grow up with an opportunity to live wholly and fully alive, healthy and abundant lives, and be everything that they can possibly be. I think that's how it should be, right? So I do have some shoulds and some ments there. And then also there's just so much that I hope for that we can move into. So we just kind of decided that we'd go back and forth between asking the question, is there a way? And also, there's a way. And how we could be, how we should be. So it's all in there and all in conversation, as I think, is maybe most helpful.
I really like that. Because I think we try and take responsibility for our lives, and that's really powerful and meaningful and important. And yet at the same time, you have to accept your own humanity and the limit. And you can put yourself, I've done this myself, put myself under so much pressure to become somebody or be somebody that I just haven't been able to be. And then you can, for me it was, I had almost had a train wreck really because of that. And you have to you have to be able to accept your humanity. And at the same time, take responsibility. I think it's very hard, that's the challenge of agency, right? How much do we really have? That's really good. So this is Live Online with Heather Lynn, pre-recorded, because we couldn't quite get a strong enough Wi-Fi signal, a consistent enough Wi-Fi signal. So Live Online with Heather Lynn, Story Dwelling edition in Cornwall, England, with my friend Matt Valler here. And he's working on an incredible project called Labyrinth to help people hack their city and learn the stories that they're dwelling in so that they can have agency to
rewrite that story and place that in ways that seem best to them. And we're going to play for you a song called In Recovery, written by our friend Tony Bean, also producer of the 9 Beats album. And we hope that you enjoy it. There comes a time when we've run out of wishes, and all that we hope for is weighed down by gold. If only the naked were clothed in the kisses of lovers, beautiful lovers. Those who believe are resigned to confessing that those seen as nothing are now to be told. They are the ones who inherit the blessings of wonder, the realms of wonder. There's a moment for all to see. Is there a way it wasn't meant to be? A way that commands of you, makes a demand on you. Voice on the wind is calling to how we could be. We're in recovery. Eyes filled with tears, overflow of souls aching, dissolving despair as they fall to the ground. Deep in the longing is burgeoning vision discovered, release and uncovered. Wildflowers bloom from the fields of abandon, once barren and scorned, disregarded and despised. Earth past her mourning, now bursting in laughter with color, blossoming color. There's a moment for all to see. Is there a way it wasn't meant to be? A way that commands of you, makes a demand on you. A voice on the wind, it is calling to how we could be. We're in recovery of how we could be. We're in recovery. Placing our hearts on the things that we have, without question their value will flow, given that we are worth more than them all. Stars of the sky that lie to you and I carry, sun fire wrapped up in muscle and bones. We are the ones for whom we've been waiting, hearts burning, glorious yearning. There's a moment for all to see. There's a way it right, live online with Heather Lynn, pre-recorded version today, Story Dwelling from Cornwall, England, with my friend Matt Valler. We just sang In Recovery by my friend Tony Bean, and the song's a little bit by me as well. It's on the 9 Beats double album. We hope you'll check that out. We'll post links, obviously. It was 9 Beats that brought us together. Matt Valler and I are part of the 9 Beats collective. And he actually wrote some of the lyrics that ended up on the album. Because when we met in Malibu for that retreat to kind of marinate in the Beatitudes, these ancient sayings, kind of poetic and subversive sayings of Jesus, I think, we thought about them in a lot of ways from a lot of different angles and did some creative work together. And I remember Matt sharing how he felt that the Gospel of Matthew is actually the first zombie apocalypse, and I was like, that's interesting. Yeah. And then you shared more about that, and then when you finally got to this piece that I'll sing and play for you in a little while, I found it really compelling and really a refreshing, insightful, kind of opening the Beatitudes up for us in a really relevant way that's to us now in this day and age, in the language that we speak. So I don't know. Do you want to say anything more about that, or?
Yeah, sure. Well, the whole thing about Matthew's gospel being the original zombie apocalypse. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's controversial. I mean, it's there, right? So in the story of Jesus, in the end, sorry about the spoiler, but Jesus gets killed, and
right.
And at the moment he's killed, graves open and people come out of the graves and they just wander into Jerusalem. And it's just not, people kind of skip over that bit because it's just freaking weird. But this is brilliant. Like, this is zombie time. And it got me thinking differently about the story of Jesus in Matthew, but also got me thinking differently about zombies. There's just the idea of the undead generally. Because I think that, we have this kind of this image of the zombie of like kind of really a bit stupid, like dull, and yet the idea that something can't be killed, I think is terrifying, and I think that's why zombies have persisted over a long time in cultures, because they're really terrifying. That if something were to advance on you and you just want to hack it to death, because you would be at your wit's end, right? You just absolutely want to kill the thing.
And to preserve your own life, or
right. And whatever. Even then, you can't do it.
Right.
It's terrifying. Like, for any Game of Thrones fans out there, like, you understand. Like, this is what we're living through. So it's a terrifying experience. And I think that has something to do with the demand for justice. So it's the undead who advance upon us, those of us who have power, the demand for justice that can't be silenced or killed or put away or just dealt with.
Right.
And so this is what I find when I'm thinking about Jesus up this mountain saying these things we call the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, and so on. And the word in the Greek is this makarios that everybody translates blessed.
Okay.
But in the Greek worldview, in Greek story, if you're dwelling in Greek stories, makarios is familiar. It's the blessing that you get if you have the life of the gods. So you're rich, you're powerful, you're famous. You're a Greek hero. You are makarios. You're blessed. And we can think about that in our cultures today. So Donald Trump is a classic makarios figure. Maybe not the athleticism, but the wealth, the power, right? So he's born into wealth, he's born into privilege, he has the life of the gods, and now he's added political power to that. And we celebrate people all across culture who have that makarios life. The world is currently massively influenced by this small number of uber rich people who meet in Davos every year with world leaders, and there's this kind of, these are the makarios, the people with great power. And what Jesus does is to say, makarios are those who are poor in spirit. They're just the broken people. Makarios are those who are meek. I think enslaved is better translation about just the downtrodden, those who are starving for justice. These are makarios, the peacemakers, the gracious, not the mighty heroes or the warriors. Now that's interesting in itself. That's like a turn upside down the world kind of statement.
Right.
But where it gets really interesting is that within this Jewish worldview that Jesus is part of, if you're not blessing, you're cursing. And so when Jesus is, the implication of Makarios in Greek culture within the Jewish worldview is that the blessed are the powerful and those who are not blessed are cursed. They are cursed like the dead. And so when Jesus flips it round and says Makarios are the broken, Makarios are the enslaved, then he is by implication cursing the powerful. They will be cursed. And I imagine this army of undead just advancing on the powers of the world, demanding a justice, demanding some kind of change. And it can't be silenced. It won't be silenced. Right. You can't stop it.
I resonate with that a lot as I think about what's happening in my country right now, and a lot of people are taking to stand up and marching around these things. Those, I think about our capitalized imprisonment system, where people who are imprisoned unjustly for the profit of those who privately own these prisons. I think of, even as we talk about identity and definition, there's a lot of people who are working to create a narrower view of what it means to be American, and a lot of us are going, wait a minute, no, what has actually created our country is immigrants, and so these people who you're calling illegal, no human can actually be illegal, and it's just not going away. And I feel like this has been happening on some level for years and years. And those who would be considered like the Makarios, as you, the very powerful, the uber wealthy, who want to keep it to themselves, they're convincing some others in the more middle class that eliminating the undead or those who are trying to marginalize even more, that's actually for the well-being of the middle class, or those who have some privilege as white people, but maybe not as much privilege as wealthy white people, or something like that. They're convincing some of us that it's for our own well-being and benefit, and it's a very scarcity mentality, and and I feel like people like, I can't really be neutral politically at this point in our story. I just feel like this is a sort of last hurrah, or they think it's a hurrah for them, to try to cling to power and cling to wealth that is not theirs to cling to and not theirs to hold on to, and so we are rising, and we are rising, and we're persisting, and we're not going away, in terms of, voices of people of color aren't going away. They're getting stronger, and they need to. So that's why I love this piece that you wrote, kind of retelling the Beatitudes in a way that makes sense and brings to light some of those things for me.
And I think there's that haunting, right? So where do we find ourselves within that? So are we the haunters, or are we the haunted?
And some of us might be a little bit of both.
I think many of us are both.
I think many of it,
because because we we all have power, and I think, like here in Cornwall, I think I just sometimes sit at night and think, where are the ghosts of the oppressed who my people have put down, and that demand for justice won't go away.
Right.
And what justice looks like is always contested, and you have to figure it out, and everybody has a different idea what that means. But the idea that the demand is there. I remember that when we were at in Malibu, that retreat center. It was like a crazy place, right? It was like our next door neighbor was Dick Van Dyke. Like, we were up this kind of like celebrity road, right? And then at the top there's this very reasonably priced Catholic retreat center. But there's like but this is like from the time when the Pope does this edict and says, if you find new lands, you could basically colonize them in the name of Christ, and that'd be totally fine. You can kill everyone there, and that'd be totally fine.
Which seems totally antithetical to the Beatitudes and what Jesus said in those words to me.
But I remember we were sitting in the hall, and I kind of was walking back late at night to where we were staying, and and I walked out there, and I felt like haunted by the ghosts of those who had died in that colonisation, and that's powerful, and you kind of want to push that away, but to open your eyes to the haunting as a powerful person, I think is important, as well as then choosing to be part of those who demand something and won't go away and won't be quiet.
I love something that you said to me a while ago about the haunting is for healing. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yeah, because you have.
It's so beautiful.
Well, because it's like if you're haunted properly, like you were. There are words I maybe shouldn't say on a live stream, but you're really scared out of your wits. You know, it should really powerfully affect you, like disturb you, break you,
make you question your story or what other story matters here. Like like zombies should keep you awake at night. But that is for the healing. It's for because unless we can work out how we live together and share our power and find ways to find life together, we are not healed. We're broken. We're broken people. Not just all of us are.
All of us. Not just because we're
even
broken.
those considered Macarios or considered.
I mean, look at Trump. He's a broken man. Hey, can I tell you one more Cornish story?
Sure.
Right, because this fits. So Cormoran, the giant on St Michael's Mount, the one who went raiding to get the sheep. So before, he had a beautiful wife giant called Carmelian, I think her name was, and they lived really happily on the mount. And he had a friend called Trebodden. No, I've got it written down somewhere. Tregoban.
Okay.
And they were really best mates, and they shared a big cobbing hammer, which is like a thing you use to separate minerals. There's loads of minerals in Cornwall. They shared this hammer, and he'd basically say, Tregoban, you know, I need the hammer, and he'd chuck him the hammer. So this guy lives like 3 miles north, right, in a village. And he'd chuck him the hammer over the hills, and Cormoran would catch it on St Michael's Mount and use the hammer, and then when the other giant needed it, throw it back. Okay. Anyway, so one day Cormoran finds that his boots need mending, and he needs something to hammer a nail into the leather. So he calls out, Tregoban, chuck us the hammer, and Tregoban walks outside with the hammer. Now Cormoran's wife, Cormelian, she's a bit partial to Tregoban, particularly when he walks out topless with a big hammer to throw. So she comes out of the cave thinking she might just catch a glimpse of him, but the sun blinds her, and she doesn't see the hammer turning its way through the air and landing smack between her eyes and knocking her down dead instantly. And Tregoban is just heartbroken, and he dies from the grief. Oh wow. And there's Cormoran, just left all alone on this mountain. His best mate and his wife died, and then great grief. And he becomes. Is that why he became vicious to the? He becomes people? The giant of the legend, and so you can have all the power, you can terrorize all the people, and you can still be broken inside. Yeah, absolutely. So the haunting is for the healing, because until we find a way to let go of our power and make peace with our past, we'll never be healed. Yeah. Thank you. I think I'll do this song. Yeah, go for it. These words that you wrote, inspired by Jesus' words. And then, Blessed are the undead. Blessed are the undead. Blessed are those you see as cursed. They are blessed.
Here come the depressed, they own the future. Here come the grieving, they will be comforted. Here come the enslaved, they will have the whole earth. Here come the ones who are starved of justice, they will be filled. Blessed are the undead, blessed are the undead, blessed are those you see as cursed, they are blessed. Here come the gracious, they will be shown grace. Here come the uncorrupted, they will see God. Here come the peacemakers, they will be protected. Here come the oppressed who are wrongly accused, they own the future. Blessed are the undead, blessed are the undead, blessed are those you see as cursed, hey, they are blessed. Here you come, you oppressed, you're wrongly accused. Take heart, take heart. They did this to your heroes, whose ghosts will not die. Take heart, take heart. They did this to your heroes, whose ghosts will not die, whose ghosts will not die.
Amazing. How do you do that?
So that was Blessed Are the Undead, lyrics written by my friend Matt Valler as a sort of subversive reinterpretation of the Beatitudes, and then I was inspired by that, so I wrote the music to it, and it's on the 9 Beats double album. I'm here in England. Jason and I are here for a couple of weeks because of the 9 Beats collective, and we're grateful for that, and grateful to be here with my friend Matt Valler and his lovely family in their this beautiful part of the coast of England. I'll post pictures of what I just gestured towards, the lovely countryside, I guess. Yeah. And we've been talking about stories and narrative and how we're shaped by them and how we shape them, how we make meaning, and how when we are more aware of the stories within and around us, we have more agency to then rewrite those stories and hopefully collaborate with others who have a varied perspective of the stories that we share together. So this is Live on Live with Heatherlyn, pre-recorded. Thank you to our patrons who help support us and continue to give us tangible support in this. Matt's actually a patron, so thank you. Thank you for being a part of that. You can check out our Patreon page to see how you can be a part of us just continuing this work, being consistent about it, and having the resources we need to keep going. It's really critical that we build this community to keep doing the work that we're doing and keep being creative and making quality content. So thank you again.
Can I give you a shout out?
Oh, sure.
I just want to say, I think that there are lots of musicians who want to make albums and tour and whatever, which is cool.
Absolutely.
But you have a thing where you actually want to really know people, and you want to dwell in their stories, and you want to make music in community with people, and that is a rare thing, and it's a very profound gift. So I want to encourage anyone to support Heatherlyn in this, and it's not just the support. I think it's a being part of something. You know,
it is. Yeah.
But as a patron, I feel like
participation.
when you go into someone's living room and you are creating something with them, then I'm part of the community that's making that happen.
Absolutely, you are. Yeah.
And that's a really, really powerful thing. It's a rare thing in the world to be able to be part of a community like that. So that's the shout out.
Yeah, right on. Thank you very much. Yeah, we really need to be communally supported without any sort of record label or something like that. So it's kind of a new thing as our world changes and we recreate the story of how music is made and shared with people. And,
which is fast changing.
Yeah,
it's really
fast changing.
It's a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. So thank you for being a part, indeed. One of the things that I thought was one of our first conversations when we met in Malibu in March of 2015, I think it was.
2016.
2016?
Yeah. This is over 18 months ago, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I can't keep track anymore of what happens. Yeah. Yes, right. That's right. Okay, so 2016, we were talking about, we both share actually a background in biblical and theological studies. And, but you brought a perspective to me that I hadn't thought too much about that I think is a really helpful idea for people of various relationships to the Bible, right? And so you gave me a little bit more perspective around how, like the Bible has been very impactful, for better or for worse, like culturally, anthropologically, the shaping of civilization as like, and literacy, right? So like the impulse and impetus that people have had to put energy behind translating the Bible has actually shaped literacy and culture, because people who've wanted to translate have gone into like these remote places, parts of the world, and transcribed the language. So they've learned the language that hasn't been written previously, and so that language then becomes written, and then because they want to put it into like the Bible in that language. And so that, for better or for worse, I feel like the story of colonialization is a part of that, and that's a really messy story, and a lot of that isn't good. Like there's subjugation of power, but it's also really fascinating to think about as you get to know the Bible. You get to know and understand the world better too, and how civilization has been created. And some would argue we're being civilized to death currently. So this is all very complex and messy.
Yeah, totally.
But would you have any thoughts you'd like to share about that?
Many.
Many thoughts. Okay.
But so I just got back from Northeast India, and which is an incredibly marginalised part, even of India and of the world, and there's a whole bunch of tribes there. So it's fascinating conversations with people, because they were saying about how they used to be like headhunter tribes. So like it was a coming of age ritual. You would go and chop someone's head off and then come and like wear it around your neck, and like it was like really barbaric. And they are now almost all Christian. They converted because the missions, I guess, the missionaries as part of the colonial project bought the Bible, translated the Bible for them, and they found there a way of peace. And that's a profound thing.
That's beautiful.
Now at the same time, they would say, we've had massive parts of our culture erased by the way in which that was done, which basically told us everything that was in our culture was bad and had to be jettisoned. And they're having to rediscover much of their cultural tradition. So it's ambivalent. I don't think you can say all of that colonial project with the Bible was like entirely bad for people. I've just heard too many stories of people saying no. I've been saying that. They were like, no, this was good for us. Like you can't take away from us that this was good for us. But yet at the same time, this was also hugely detrimental.
Yeah.
And it's true, not just in northeast India, like right in the centres of power, particularly in Europe and cultures that have been shaped by Europe, so North America, Australia, and so on. That set of texts that is the Bible has massively shaped the way people organise themselves, how they think about the laws that they make, the cultural norms.
Yeah.
But the big thing for me, right, is that there is a huge pressure on the way that people interpret the Bible. I mean, it's really overwhelming.
Right.
There's these interpretations are off limits,
right.
and these are the ones that are allowed.
Right.
And that creates huge problems because the scriptures, even within themselves, are massively contested.
Yep.
So I was saying to you before, like I'm into the Bible in a big way, but I had to jettison all my theological reasons for being into the Bible. This is the word of God, it carries authority, it therefore says what I should do with my life, so on and so on. I'm not interested in any of that. What I'm interested in is these texts, because actually in the end, I almost threw the whole thing away. In the end I was like, I can't, because I'm actually a fan.
Yeah.
I'm just a big fanboy, and I just because it's an epic narrative. I mean, and there's this story movement, but there's all these different people writing all these different perspectives. Poetry, history, law, song. Trying to respond to all of the movement that's going on in the story, and it's contested. And the people who say that the Bible doesn't contradict itself are just crazy. It's just total nonsense. Is a set of texts that are at each other's throats for supremacy and legitimacy. And I'm just totally fascinated by that. And I love being in the story because that is the complexity that we find ourselves in the world, where we're just in all these stories, all vying for dominance. And here's another one which allows me to step out of my place and space and particular culture and history and imagine myself in this other kind of dynamic movement and stuff happening that you wouldn't expect. Like, if you didn't know it, the idea that the Messiah gets killed and then turns out to be the hero is nuts, but it's such a familiar idea,
right?
And Pete Rollins, that we both know, would say, this is the moment where it's revealed that God isn't there. The curtain is torn, and there's just no one there, and Jesus is abandoned, and resurrected life is when you wake up to that and live differently as a result. Now that's a radical reading of the story, but I think it's a legitimate reading, and the text constantly gives up this new meaning, and puts like slippery surfaces under the things that we're sure of, and that's why it keeps being meaningful. And so as there's an element that it's a really profound cultural resource for us. If you guys in the US want to hack the Constitution and the way in which big money shapes politics, you have to hack the Bible in some way, I think, because so much of the culture has been built on that kind of tradition. But that's not the only reason, and that's not the only resource. And in the end, I come to it because I just love the story, and I find it so meaningful.
Yeah, and I feel like in this work that you're doing, whether it's in Northeast India or if it's with the Labyrinth work, you're inviting people to consider what you had mentioned to me earlier about resonance, and you can find the places of harmony and you can find the places of dissonance, and both are a part of making the whole song, right? If you use that metaphor, like there's suspension and tension in song, and there's sometimes dissonance and sometimes harmony, and I feel like you're inviting people to lean into the complexity instead of it all being everything that's understandable and makes sense and is easy to listen to or easy to hear. Like, lean into the tension and the discord and find what that's about, and dwell in it for a while, and
totally,
and see.
Don't there's no need to rush, with meaning. I think that's the thing. Like, we just don't need to rush, and we don't need to solve things. what do we think is going to happen? Like we're gonna recreate Eden, and then everything will be fine, and we'll all be just skipping around naked and not noticing. I mean, like what do we think it's going to be? Like we're never going to arrive.
Yeah, it sort of doesn't seem like it. It seems like part of the journey is to continually lean into the complexity, to try to learn to live out a loving way, a way of I always qualify restorative justice, so not retributive justice, but
I'm totally with you on that.
But restorative justice, so that the haunting is about the healing. So there may be this disturbance, but it's always trying to lean towards and create. I don't know if harmony is the right word at this point, but this at the moment is relating very much for me to Dr. Martin Luther King's dream and imagination, and how do we live into that together. Some of it is dismantling power, some of it's taking apart story, some of it's for some of us it's letting go of some of our privilege. It's finding ways to be empowered as individual human beings, but not in a way that's like power over and above someone else. Learning maybe that love really is the only power there is in the world when you're talking about transformation and change. So I've been very disappointed, and it's been hard for me to keep up with everything the past few days, but I've been very disappointed about the repeal of DACA. I feel that it's actually inhumane and also very un-American, ironically, I guess, maybe, because I feel that our country is made of immigrants who want to aspire to contributing to society and living full lives, and I feel like 800,000 children who are here because their parents were probably wanting a better life and a more beautiful life and whole and full life. It's a very scarcity mentality to say that's that they can't be a part of that, when the whole American dream, I feel, is like you can be a part of this. So anyway, I'm gonna sing the song Imagine in honor of that. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I'm not a dreamer in terms of the DACA definition, but I do dream with and alongside, and it just circles back to all of these things we've been talking about what does it mean to have distinction or definition and have identity and maybe celebrate difference, but also honor someone else's identity, and how do we share identity, and who gets to decide that or define that, and hopefully we're listening and allowing people to also be agents of their own story and their own story sharing. Is there anything else you'd like to share before I do this last song, or anything that
well, maybe one thing, like just to clarify what I mean by dancing around naked in Eden, because I think that because the image of that, right, is the innocent. That
would be shameless, if you were shameless and just didn't have to cover up anything or hide anymore.
But I think it's a regression. I think that it's a we don't really want to have to deal with the desperate complexity of the world. And so we just long for Eden.
I see.
And so to be able to say it was necessary to leave the garden, and actually the place we dream of is not this simple place where no one has to worry anymore, but is a world that we can actually build in all the complexity. That is something that we might be able to achieve. But dreams of Eden,
I love that.
maybe just always elude us and leave us missing what's right in front of our nose.
I love that. So how can people connect with you and find Labyrinth City Hacks? I know it's still in the making, it's still in the process.
So it's early days, but so you can get the app. If you're in Melbourne, definitely get the app. It's an amazing experience in the city. We hope to have that very soon. If you're in Dallas or Washington DC, we'll be hacking those mid October.
That's awesome.
So that'll be cool.
I'm excited about that.
And so search for Labyrinth. I think it's Labyrinth_city is the Facebook page. So there's a stack of stuff there. The website's labyrinth.city. And if you want to read any of my other stuff, I have a blog at mattvaller.com.
Nice.
And
we'll share the link so they can see.
Thank you. Perfect.
Okay. Awesome. Oh, well, Thank you for having us in your home. Thanks for allowing us to story dwell with you. Thanks for being our guest on Live Online with Heather Lynn.
I was so happy to do
So
this.
fun. Thanks for supporting us as well. And I think I will go ahead and close with John Lennon's song, Imagine. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger, no. Our brotherhood, man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. No, I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one. Live as one. Oh, live as one. Keep imagining, keep dreaming, you all. Thanks for joining us. Peace to you and yours.